Hey, hello. Hello, everyone. George Webb. I was just around the corner at the Los Angeles Air Force Base where the F-18 is made just behind me with Northrop Grumman, and I showed the various things that came out of the Los Angeles Air Force Base. Of course, Howard Hughes doing all the guided missiles, a very big part of the Cold War, Mayhew, the CIA operative, controlling him, and so forth. And what we do is we take those programs, we do a fast forward to now, to Dr. Sun Xiong. And sorry, it's a busy street here near LAX, but Dr. Sun Xiong, of course, is the one where I visited his 1 billion shot mRNA vaccine factory, as well as potentially could make Anktiva, which is his cancer drug, his bladder cancer drug. He did the 100-minute infomercial about Anktiva on Tucker Carlson. They never even said Anktiva. They never said it caused kidney. In 76% of their patients caused kidney critical creatinine levels to rise. This is your kidneys, sign of health. Mine was over 3 when I was in the hospital, stage 4 kidney failure, right? So they forget that key statistic and they want to give it to kids and to all the vaccinations in kids. But the new news, of course, my days almost ended protesting against mRNA vaccines in San Diego. But the big new news is it's not a nothing burger. It's a Taubman burger. Not a nothing burger. Not a nothing burger. It's a Taubman burger. Taubman burger, literally the guy who brought back Spanish flu. The guy who went supposedly and got autopsies from people who died of Spanish flu 100 years ago, supposedly killed 20 million people. That's how he reconstructed the genome of Spanish flu since it's gone from the earth. We say it's actually in Bar Harbor at the Rockefeller lab for 100 years. It's been on ice for 100 years. And you may remember, I wrote about this in October 2023 at Bar Harbor. We covered Sir Henry Oakes being killed, and maybe King Edward himself, as a governor of the Bahamas, putting either Nazi scientists or the Nazi scientists' virus, which is Spanish flu H1N1, into the ports of New England. That was the plan, supposedly. He's murdered with an ice pick, actually a silver pick, from the Savoy Hotel in England, kind of like nothing like leaving a signature, right? And also a mining pick. He's also Sir Henry Oakes is a gold mining magnate, like one of the biggest. So there's a lot of intrigue. We wrote about it in October 23. We said they might try to bring back the Spanish flu, either H1N1 or H5N1. Here we are. It's not a nothing burger. It's a Taubman burger. The Taubman burger has now replaced Mr. Fauci at the #1 institute of NIH, National Health Institute of Health. The Taubman burger is at NIAID. The Taubman burger is in. The guy who brought back Spanish flu is in at NIAID. This is the guy who was a consort with Peter Daszak with EcoHealth Alliance. He's in coronavirus up to his eyeballs. How this happened under Trump's nose, hard to say. We'll keep bringing you the truth. Tucker, if you don't want to cover the creatinine levels, we'll cover the creatinine levels. If you don't want to, 76%. It raised his creatinine levels in 70. I had a creatinine over 3. I worked like mad to get it down to 1.33. And you're going to give it to kids? The thing about these filtering organs is you don't know what the long-term effects are. Anktiva's only been on the market less than a year, and it's only for bladder cancer, and it's only for smokers, for male smokers who've smoked over 30 years. That's not the kind of data that we need to start giving this out as a bioshield,
Hello, welcome to Neighborhood News. George Webb investigates. Hello, George. Dr. StrangeBlood is on the loose.
There he is. You can't. Hey, Mark. How are you?
Good.
Yeah. Well, I gave him the nickname Dr. StrangeBlood because
this is, on the scale of like who is the most riskiest person that you could ever put in at NIAID with most people would say Fauci's like an 8, right, or a 9, right? Well, once you put Taubenberger on the scale and say let's say Taubenberger's a 10, that takes Fauci down to like a 2, in terms of danger. So I mean, I'm talking about somebody who totally resets the scales. It's sort of like before Babe Ruth, 14 home runs a year led the major leagues, home run Baker, and then all of a sudden Babe Ruth hit 60. It's what a lot of home runs is, changes. And this, you can't have somebody who's more dangerous running NIAID. You can't have somebody more dangerous running it. This makes Fauci look like a Girl Scout selling Girl Scout cookies.
Well, so do we think RFK Jr. is just asleep at the wheel, worrying too much about dick pics and whatever else? Or do we think that it's a deeper scenario here and that there's an infiltration network that he may be a part of? Because I see Brett Weinstein, I see Robert Malone and all of their alliances with RFK, and I think, oh boy, do we have a school play being presented to us?
Yeah, this has to be a compromise. This has to be, and I understand Bobby Kennedy wanted to stay married to Cheryl Hines. It's kind of late in your life to be a playboy. He's in his 70s, I think, right? So it's kind of like, okay, you need to kind of quit and settle down. I don't think he wants to get divorced. And I do think that they have the picks. Everybody knows what's going to happen with the picks. Everybody, Cheryl Hines already wrote the 6 on the shower in the steam. So everybody already knows kind of what the D picks are going to be, but Bobby Kennedy doesn't want his D picks out there.
And I mean, you think that may be part of the origin of how something like this happened?
Well, why else would they bring out Newsy the Floozy? Newsy the Floozy, that story kind of died right before the election. They were trying to use that as kind of like, compromise right before the election to take Bobby Kennedy out. I think the plan always was to have Bobby Kennedy as a third party candidate that would take votes away from Trump. That backfired.
Mm-hmm.
He took Trump votes away from Kamala. But then the pulling the rug out for him with the October surprise was going to be the D picks, but that also landed flat. And so why did they bring that back out right in April when this guy was being named, when Taubenberger was being named, if it wasn't for compromise?
The timing is suspicious. I will actually read the press release here just to give everybody the background. Mark, yeah, you got some comments?
Well, the other thing too with someone like RFK Jr. is that he's going to have women that are going to be, because of his status and his wealth, that are, and they're naturally being hypergamous. He's going to have the availability of women and could make good choices and bad choices in that. But when you're just, a schlub, you don't think about that. But he would be a superstar. He would be a catch, and a lot of women would like to be a RFK trophy wife or have something on him, so.
Oh, there's no question. He's in really good shape. He's made physical fitness a big thing. So he's in great shape. And this woman is 50 years younger, I think, or at least 40 years younger, Newsy the Floozy. So he's proven that he can transcend generations. Does he want to start over is my question, because Cheryl Hines said she was going to move in with him out in Washington, D.C., and then she just lives right over here, not too far away in Santa Monica. So what do you do? Apparently it's working, because I don't think there's any other way you could put somebody like Taubenberger. This would not be, if you sat down with Bobby Kennedy and went through the list of the top 50 candidates that you'd replace Fauci. He wrote a book about Fauci. right? About how bad this was, putting it, people doing gain.
RFK did, right? RFK wrote a book about
RFK wrote a book about the predecessor that's really widely quoted. I read it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's about people doing gain of function. And this guy is the gain of function champion of all time. This isn't gaining a function to get a chicken virus over to humans like H5N1. This is H1N1, which is Spanish flu. This is the all-time champion, as far as 20 million killed. So you just wonder, how could he have possibly picked this person unless there was some kind of really serious stuff, maybe his wife's diary or something, from the one who committed suicide, something really bad about Bobby Kennedy that pushed him into this decision.
Well, there has been a multi-generational effort to run women at the Kennedys, right? I mean, as you've reported, refer to George Webb's Substack if you want to know about, them running women at the Kennedys. Maybe he finally, read your Substack and he's like, you know what? Maybe they've just been running women at me the way they ran women at my dad and ran women at my uncle and ran women at my aunt.
Trump. And against Trump. And maybe Trump's kind of like, look, I can do it. You can too, come on, I guess.
Well, he kind of made a comment like that yesterday at the rally, which I think everybody kind of pretended they didn't hear. But yeah, so I took the liberty of writing I rewrote Dr. Strangelove, which was about nuclear war, and I changed the setting, which is Stanley Kubrick's work, and I changed the setting to biological warfare. If you do a little control plus, you make it a little bit bigger, yeah.
Let's see. Okay.
But yeah, there we go. That's good enough, yeah. But yeah, so this is the same plot as Dr. Strangelove, but it's Dr. StrangeBlood, and it's the reason why I rewrote it is because it's forward looking. It's not backward looking. Dr. Strangelove was sort of a hypothetical movie, but here you have that Dutch virologist. Here's all the ferrets. You remember the ferrets that were, and you're trying to get it to go from one ferret to another because their lungs are so much like our lungs with the serial passaging. And then as you roll through there, what he then enlists a lab assistant in this story. You'll see it in the pictures. The lab assistant's named Shuang Wu. And what they're going to do is they're going to take, once they get a really nasty version of this that kills the most amount of ferrets, they're going to see he's trying to do two things on the wall there. He's trying to move H5N1, and then he's also trying to bring back the Spanish flu to really get the numbers up. Right. So then, but now he's going to go get his lab assistant, which is going to be Shuang Wu, because what you got to do is you got to get this into the air conditioning systems in the hospitals, right? If you're going to have another pandemic. So he reads this white paper. This white paper says, if we could get to 20 million dead, we could put the teeth back into pandemics. People aren't scared of pandemics anymore.
We lost you a little bit, George. You froze on us. But yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
There you go. You're good.
Must
We're back.
have said the word that tripped the.
Yeah. There's Shuang Wu, Fort Belvoir, Virginia Respiration Clinic. There she is. Did we lose you? It's hiccuping. Yeah, maybe you can go and come back or whatever. But yeah, Dr. Shuang Wu, of course, Jordan Walker's boss there at Pfizer was Sarah Shuang Wu. Is where it all is where that name came up in the research for folks wondering where Shuang Wu came from. But
remember,
okay, there you go. We have you back. No, we don't have you back. I wonder if it's our internet or yours. I guess.
It's probably mine.
Oh yeah, you got hotel Wi-Fi there, maybe something like that. StrangeBlood Health Clinic, free oxygen bar, Fort Belvoir, Virginia, Sprayer Street. Aerosolizing of the pathogens is what it's all about. And Rand, of course, it all starts with Rand. You got our doctor from Rand there. Shuang Wu again with Dr. Strangeblood. And yeah, so much research. And then here they move to Ukraine. This is where the story moves to the Ukraine. aerosolizing from drones in the Ukraine. And pop back in. We got you back. There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I have
We've
to
moved
come.
to Ukraine here. I kept it moving. I kept the narration moving. So Shuang Wu and Dr. Strangelove have moved to the aerosolization through drones over the Ukraine, over the disputed areas of the Donbass and Luhansk and everything there in the Ukraine. To spread.
Everything's going fine, right? They got the most virulent, they've serially passaged the Erasmus lab. They got the MQ-9 General Atomics Reaper. By the way, the name of that General Atomics Reaper there, that MQ-9, is called the IB Hale.
Yeah, there it is.
The name of that MQ-9 Reaper is called the IB Hale, and James Jameson has personally signed that. So as you see there, the plan's going along good here. We're creating a really nasty. Rand Corporation said we need to kill 20 million. 1 million's not enough because that didn't, it's kind of like WTC 93, where it really didn't kill that many people. But then 9/11 will knock down 2 buildings and we'll kill 3,000 people, right? So that's the strategy here. And you can see how they're looking through their binoculars, making sure the Russians are getting it good. Right. And then as you roll through here, as you roll forward, you can see that she also works on the other side. Here she is on the Russian side, and she's collecting all the blood samples of these Russians that are getting sick and dying. So this is creating a mass formation psychosis with the Russian high command.
That's our sword and shield. This is how they'll end up getting the vaccine or the antibody.
Right.
They'll get it out of the sick ones, whichever sick ones ultimately didn't die.
Right.
Their blood and their antibody.
Or you can get it from the ones that die too. So if you keep rolling, you'll see that they make a presentation to the Joint Chiefs, and they pitch their universal flu vaccine. Now, you remember my old partner thought this was going to happen with flu in 2019. And she thought Tim Alephantis with GSK was going to be the shield was going to be GSK universal flu. And you see they got the deal, they got the check, and they're going to give everybody this universal flu vaccine, and this is going to be a happy ending. We put the sword out there, we got the check for the shield. 20 million died, successful operation. Where it goes wrong.
So notice, here, just folks who notice that the check on the left has the GSK, right?
Yeah.
GlaxoSmithKline is giving the $1 million over here.
Is getting the $1 million, yeah.
Is getting, okay, and then the Russian Federation is this check over here, right?
They're writing checks. And this is the whole idea. You create a mass formation psychosis, and then you get a check, right? So, and you can't do that without stacking up some bodies. But things go wrong. What ends up happening is the vaccine causes a mutation, causing a directed evolution, which causes the deaths. You see the deaths hockey stick behind them? See how the deaths have gone up 10 times? So that's a backfire, right? So that's happening in the Russians. Well, they've been there 3 months in Ukraine. Now they're hoping that they didn't do that same vaccination back at Fort Belvoir. And they come back and they find, oops, you see where it's the vaccination on the timeline there, and then you see the deaths, hockey stick straight up, right? So that's the end of part 1. But the story ends with the deaths aren't just at the military bases; they've gone over into the civilian population. Right.
Here,
so it's
the ending here. The U.S. generals were even angrier than the Russian general staff. Not only had the U.S. soldier GlaxoSmithKline universal flu vaccinations gone ahead, but the new mutated respiratory virus was moving through the civilian populations near military bases. To be continued. Yep, sounds like our lives.
So that's Dr. Strangeblood. That series started today, and that's episode 1.
All in honor of the newly appointed, not just nominated, appointed. He's in the job, acting director of the NIAID, Jeffrey Taubenberger, aka Dr. Strangeblood. Sorry, I guess we're giving it away here.
All right. Well, so
what's the question, Mark? Yeah,
with George on these deaths, and I'm wondering if there's maybe a relationship to this. Is I had run across these stories of people that had died. Okay. and their corpse, even in the grave, is still transmitting a MAC address. And within the story, it was that like the
Oh, I don't know. That's
the
that graphene stuff. I think
like,
that's from the graphene
well,
thing.
That's what I'm asking is, this supposedly if you took the 3 shots, it's assembled assembled this graphene or whatever that permitted this, creating, turning into a MAC address. And I just is there is this just some craziness, or is there something to that, and is it related to this, maybe this guy succeeding here at NIH is this another program that's going on in the background?
Well, I don't think we're there yet, but I think that's where they want to be. The way it works when you're in a store, it's called a passive device. So when you have an RFID tag on a pair of socks or a pair of underwear, and what happens is the energy is not coming from the underwear or the socks. It's energy being sent out to the RFID, but then your RFID is charged by that, and it does give a little signal, right? It echoes a signal back, so that it goes, oh, Mark's trying to steal underwear again, or George is trying to steal socks again, right? So if you had a detector, this is the whole idea of trying to get this technology into the human body, right? Outside the body, it's great. We can track clothing, but if they change their clothes, we're not going to be able to track the terrorist. If there was some way we could echo a signal to the terrorist, that would be the best of all worlds. And microneedles are talking about trying to get microneedles. Some of these patches, some of these fentanyl patches have this capability, but I don't think we're there yet. But not graphene, but there's this thing called nanoferritin, which could possibly self-assemble, like, how magnets will stack, like a stack of quarters or a stack of nickels. There is some hope that it would act like a bar antenna, and that you could send a signal out and it would echo back this is Comrade Webb, or this is Comrade Buckley. So I definitely think that's in the plan.
Maybe the flu, though, is like a body's reaction to having this in there, and you're getting a flu-like symptom.
Could be. I don't have any of the blood draws from these people that are coming down with this just yet, and I'm waiting for where Shuang Wu is, and I'm waiting for where there's 30 Shuang Wus. Remember, there was 30 different Shuang Wus at 30 different companies. I find that odd, and that was February in Boston at the Marriott Hotel where Bob Malone was having the investor conference. And then CDC came out, if you remember, and then they said, oh, there's 20 million that are going to die. Ira Longini came out, which is Bob Malone's buddy from WHO, and said 20 million are going to die. Was that all just rehearsal for this next round? I don't know. That's why I wrote Dr. Strangeblood this morning, just to see, like, the first thing that has to line up before the Shakespearean play starts is the Shakespearean actors, right? So, I mean, before you go out to the play, and if you don't see any of the actors getting together at the stage underneath the curtains, you know that nothing's going to happen just yet. But when you start seeing the actors start moving around underneath, you know that something's about ready to happen. And this Dr. Strangeblood has taken the stage.
So here I'll read the press release here that precipitated the news. Jeffrey K. Taubenberger, MD, PhD, was named the acting director of NIAID in April 2025. He oversees a $6.6 billion budget that supports research to advance the understanding, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of infectious, immunological, and allergic diseases. He is a senior investigator in the intramural research program and serves as chief of the viral pathogenesis and evolution section and deputy chief of the Laboratory of Infectious Diseases, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Dr. Taubenberger's research interests include influenza virus and coronavirus, biology and evolution, pathophysiology, clinical and translational research, and development of broadly protective vaccines. Past research accomplishments include the sequencing, reconstruction, and characterization of the virus responsible for the 1918 influenza pandemic, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Those numbers are highly suspicious. They grow every decade. They throw another 10 million people on there. I don't think those numbers are accurate, but that is the big story, to our research community, is when we see that his past accomplishments include the sequencing, reconstruction, and characterization of the virus responsible for the 1918 influenza pandemic. So,
well,
and there it is. Mm-hmm.
And thank you. And if you think about it, 100 years ago, there was not, most people didn't have access to plane travel. There was maybe Lindbergh, might have had access to a plane, but not like today, where we've got, people just going everywhere in the airports. And I'm not even saying this is how human to human transmission happens, but I am saying that it is a way of explaining a pandemic away. And if you do have Shuang Wu and you do have those doped air filters, this is a way of getting it into everybody's lungs. And again, I'm not the one with the patents at York Air Conditioning. She's the one with the patents at York Air Conditioning. So if they're going to do it, I say it's going to be Shuang Wu again. Again, you don't have to go any farther. James O'Keefe says there's some big story is going to drop today. I think it may be Shuang Wu. He's going up one level on his org chart. He's discovered the Pfizer org chart, and he's going to go up one level to Shuang Wu. She's also the person who wrote the light speed white paper, which got all the folks at Pfizer to leave their egg-based vaccine and move over to mRNA for all of Pfizer. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the other companies like Moderna, Moderna has a new mRNA vaccine. They just got $112 million. Somebody just gave them $112 million. I think it was Moderna just got a whole bunch of money. I think Bobby Kennedy, HHS, gave Moderna a whole bunch of money for their mRNA flu vaccine. Now, we've had less than 70 cases, I think, of H5N1. So this kind of reminds you of BARDA. Remember the Millikan Institute? That's coming up here in Los Angeles in a couple of days.
Amazingly enough, just in time for our charrette.
Yeah, just in time for our charrette, which is the Entity of Excitement. I think that's going to be another BARDA Entity of Excitement charrette here. So we'll be covering it live with Rick Bright on stage. But so those are the things to be looking for is, what did they do the last time? And then so we can anticipate it happening again.
Yep, for all those who were not aware, the Millikan Institute is where they gathered. Prior to Event 201, there was the Millikan Institute meeting, which is where Rick Bright made his big Entity of Excitement statement, and so much else went on. Looks like Dr. Jill Biden will be joining the Millikan Institute. Not a surprise.
I think she's a virologist now. I can't remember what she had in the hamster raising. I can't remember what her PhD is in, but now she's a virologist expert.
Mm-hmm. A couple items here just to ask from your video there. Who was Dr. Harry Oakes? Is this old?
He's not a doctor. He's not a doctor, but
British gold mine owner, entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist.
Yeah, he's not. This isn't the first time. This isn't the first time that H1N1 Spanish flu. The idea was that there would be some German agent, and maybe it was a setup, but some German agent would get H1N1 into New England, and then they would spread it amongst the ports in New England. And because of the nature of supporting Britain, if you shut down at that time in World War I, if you shut down the ship traffic, Britain has no big brother to ship anything, and Britain starves, and then they probably sue for peace. And then in World War II is the same thing. If again, plane traffic and plane cargo really didn't come into the picture. So we know they tried it in World War I. right? We know the Germans tried it in World War One. It just didn't come in time for the armistice, right? But World War II would have been the time to retry this thing. So anyway, Sir Henry Oakes was a British citizen, mining, a very wealthy mining guy. And if you remember, King Edward VIII abdicated from the throne of England, and they were very good friends with each other. And he went to become the Governor General of Bermuda, which is where all the paperclip Nazis came in. You may remember the submarine that was, we all live in a Bezos submarine, LP Geist submarine. That this, Bermuda was a big sub base for getting the paperclip Nazis into the United States with Jeff Bezos's grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is that Edward was he was friends with Hitler. He had driven his car up the Berchtesgaden. He was a close friend of he saw it as his royal family. It wasn't the Windsor family as a creation. It's Saxe-Coburg is their real family. So he thought, well, why don't we rerun what we tried in? Well, the reason why he might have abdicated, he said it was because of Wallace Simpson, but it might be because he didn't want to be king and be attacking the people he felt like his brothers, So for all these reasons, was this tried? This isn't just now being tried. Was this tried in World War II? I'll let Mark go here because I know Mark knows a lot about this.
Well, I just came. This is a coincidence. I don't know if I get this picture to show up in the.
You're not gonna know. I mean, just tell. I mean, we got to teach you how to send stuff on the airdrop and stuff so that I can put it on the screen and all that. But
there's a picture of a big old warehouse in Boston. And it's owned and operated by Bush Terminal Buildings Company. Over 6 million square foot of industrial floor space, and then come to find out this is like Prescott's dad that owned this business. And I was just wondering with the Boston, if this was maybe there was a connection there.
Yeah. Well, and the foodstuffs that were for the military, again, if you make a bunch of, old ladies who are going downtown to get scrod, that really doesn't affect the war effort. There's the old ladies of two old ladies on the bus in Boston, and the one lady says, "Why did you go downtown?" And she said, "To get scrod." And the other lady said, "Well, I did too, but I didn't know that was a pronunciation." So you have to, but it's a form of fish. But what I'm saying is, if you infect the fish or infect the foodstuffs, you don't want to just get the old ladies who are coming down on the bus to get scrod. You want to make sure that that's going to the soldiers that are fighting age. And the ports and the packing houses, as Mark has pointed out, is where you would want to go with this H1N1 that Sir Henry Oakes would have wanted to go. The sardines or the K rations, remember that? The K ration canning plants that they used to have. This is where Henry Oakes probably was heading. Now, they were going into Bar Harbor, Maine, which is a little bit north of Boston. And they had the Rockefeller lab there. So there was a lot of talk about, putting Nazi scientists in the Rockefeller lab and doing the same thing I'm talking about now with Dr. StrangeBlood in World War II. But what happened was Henry Oakes went back to Bermuda. He left his family there in Bar Harbor. And then he was murdered with this silver ice pick from the Savoy Hotel in London. I mean, so there's not a lot of people running around Bermuda with a silver ice pick. This may be where Bang Bang Maxwell's silver hammer, what the Beatles were talking about. A silver ice pick from the Savoy Hotel. Not a lot of people running around Bermuda with that unless you're, in the royal family. Not the investigation, the murder investigation was run by King Edward himself. King Edward ran the murder investigation of Sir Henry Oakes in Bermuda. And there's a Substack I've written about this as well. When we were talking about where do all these things come from? How do they appear magically 100 years later? The story is that they got an Eskimo, out of the permafrost 100 years later to get the genome, or is it out of the deep freeze refrigerator at Bar Harbor, the Rockefeller Museum, Rockefeller refrigerator?
Here was exiled to the Bahamas for his rumored Nazi sympathies. The Duke of Windsor's hopes for a quiet war were shattered by the gruesome ice pick murder, unsolved to this day, of one of the world's richest men. We learned so much on this show. I'm glad I asked. What did you know about here? Did you have another comment, Mark?
Well, I was just
Do you know about
curious
this?
if Oak's relationship to George the Fifth, the King of England until 1936, and Edward VIII's father. What Oakes's relationship was there? Because I'm wondering if there might have been something there.
There was a relationship. Sir Henry Oakes was a big miner in Canada, and a lot of the British war material for World War I came from Sir Henry Oakes and the mining interests in Western Canada from Sir Henry Oakes, and that's why he was so a good of a friend of Edward. He was more of a contemporary in terms of, he was a little bit older than Edward, but they knew each other for a long time, and I believe it was through the war industries in Canada. I would have to go back and see how far back the relationship goes, but they knew each other for a long time.
Well, I'm just like hypothecating here, a conjecture that possibly, there was always this idea that George was like murdered in his bed, similar like Garfield by his doctors, because he wasn't having another war, because he'd been through the First World War and seen what it had done to England, had no part of it. But he died, and then Edward became king, and Edward abdicated. I just wondered if maybe, so I'm just like, was maybe Oakes maybe responsible for the end of George, and so there was a hit essentially to cover, in some way. But
well, I wouldn't say it was Oakes, that, because he was he was a profiteer, no question about it, with the mining interests, the molybdenum and all these things, these rare earth metals for the war. But Winston Churchill certainly would have been the person responsible for taking George out and then putting George E. in, the younger son named George, who wasn't in line in the ascension. And basically he was the stutterer, and he was the one that the other Colin, English actor, played the King's Speech. And he was very controllable. He was just, he barely could speak. And it basically was Winston Churchill's puppet to take Britain into the Second World War.
Fascinating stuff. I'm glad I asked. There's so much just in your little 4-minute Twitter videos. There's so much stuff, that you just got to grab onto it. For folks who are trying to get everything and learn everything, trying to catch up with the research community, you don't have to even bother to do it like that. George always said, just let it pour over you. Watch it, listen, grab what you can, dive in where you can. You're not going to get every little bit of information. Certainly this research dive is many years in the making here. So,
and well, you can always go to the Substack and you can see this whole thing. It's kind of like the Lindbergh baby. It's just one of those stories that just is even 100 years later, people are trying to solve the Lindbergh baby case. It's one of those cold cases that's fun to talk about, but the reason why it's important right now is because you've got Dr. Strangeblood appearing on the stage. It's sort of like when the apothecary in a Shakespearean play appears on the stage, the poison isn't long to follow. It's like, why is Juliet talking to the apothecary? Why is Romeo talking to the apothecary? It's not to get headache medicine, right? It's usually to get some kind of poison, and poison's coming out pretty quick. Or in Hamlet, the poison's tipped swords are coming out pretty quick. Or here comes Lady Macbeth, and they're going to pour it in the eardrum of the king, and in Macbeth, when you see the poisoner in chief going into a leadership position, this guy makes like Gottlieb look like a Cub Scout. I mean, we're going right back to Sir Henry Oakes in World War II here. This is Spanish flu.
What is it, the military? Next man up? He's just, next man up.
Well, I wouldn't say he's the next man up. I wouldn't, because he's out of all the people you could have picked. This is the poisoner in chief. And again, if with a respiratory thing.
Oh, we might have lost you a little bit there. The hand motions get the bandwidth goes when the hand motions sometimes, but here's some more work of Jeffrey Taubenberger's their effective pandemic influenza A virus PB1 genes on avian origin of viral RNA polymerase activity and pathogenicity. Just seeing that, yeah, he has definitely worked in the mRNA space, taking old diseases, old viruses, and making them new again, which, we don't think everybody out there is duplicitous or nefarious in that space. However, considering what happened with coronavirus and how we figure that really was a mass formation zoonosis, George, you can steal that term when you come back, I guess. I mean, from mass formation psychosis, most of the zoonoses that they've been telling us are things to worry about are fake. It's been a fake, from as long as you want to go back, which we won't go all the way back right now. But George, I just made up the term mass formation zoonosis. So that's what we're working with here is the mass formation zoonosis. And that's why that's why we got our stink eye out. That's why we're on the lookout for folks who are in this space, who are going to pull this crap on us again, because it was crap 5 years ago. And, we've got to be sure that
70%. My power is on 70%. I made sure it was powered up here, and I'm near a window. It just wham. But that's the here's the thing to understand this easily, right? To just take the complexity out of the whole thing, right? If you accept the idea that Germany's at war, and this is not speculation, okay, and that Germany sent people to Fort Riley, and they put a flu, had combined a flu into a pneumonia. Could be pneumonia, could be flu, could be a combination of both of those things. But that allowed it to go from horse to man. And then it could go then from pneumonia can go from between animals zoonotically, right? So it goes from, and then what happened with all the horses, that's where the cavalry and the horse wranglers all left from, is Fort Riley, Kansas. Everyone said this was a conspiracy theory. Now everyone says, no, that's where it started. That's where the Spanish flu started. And what they wanted to do was make all the horses sick before they got to the war. But the guys who were taking the horses over were with the horses for 30 days. These horses are sick and breathing all this stuff onto everybody with all the snot and everything. And the guys who were managing the horses are right there, taking care of the horses. So they're getting sick. So did German agents spread this in World War I? Yes. Right? So that's not even a question. Did they try to do it in World War II, which would have also made sense? Well, they would have had to find somebody who was sympathetic to their cause, which we know Edward was, right? They would have had to have somebody with some money who could, get it to a lab like the Rockefeller lab at Bar Harbor. We know that he had a place in Bar Harbor. We know that King Edward had a place in Bar Harbor. We know that he was killed with this ice pick from the Savoy Hotel in London, right? So did they try to do it in World War II? Okay, so this is real simple. It's symmetrical. 1, II, and then now World War III, right? We have the Third World War that they're trying to get going, which is to get the United States involved with NATO into a third world war. Now, they don't want a missile war. They want a conventional war for another 20 years so that they can develop out these virus vaccine shields and so forth. But wouldn't this be the reason why I take it to Ukraine is because you can blame it on Ukraine. You could blame it. You could blame it on the poor conditions in the Crimea. You can blame it on the, sort of like even going even further back to the Crimean War with the British. You can blame Spanish flu we had with yellow fever and the yellow fever vaccines with the Rockefeller vaccines. It gives you a great way to say, look at these wars. We should have, Trump, especially when Trump gets rid of the people that are doing surveillance at CDC for flu. This is the perfect window for them to say, oh, it's Trump's fault.
So could you have had more deaths in the Spanish flu as a result of like the mustard gas and other, chemical weapons that were used in the war itself that just would have weakened people? That might have been the cause of the greater mortality in that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. The H5N1 somehow made the pneumonia much more aerosolizable with the spike potentially. And either it was the initial infection maybe not kill you, which was the H5N1, but then the secondary infection with the bacteria killed probably 80 to 90% of the deaths. But once you're dead, you really don't care what the primary was and what the secondary was. And again, I'm not trying to bang the drum here, but it's sort of like watching a Shakespearean play. And if you've seen any other Shakespeare plays, when the apothecary takes the stage, that's a bad sign. That means the poison's coming. And here we've got Taubenberger. Like I say, Fauci's a 2. If Taubenberger's a 10, Fauci's like a 2 or a 3. And I think even Bobby Kennedy would say that. And he wrote the book on Fauci. So somebody had to get Taubenberger past Bobby Kennedy, and they had to have something really bad on Bobby Kennedy. It couldn't have just been D-Pix. It would have to be something like, Bobby Kennedy had that diary. His wife had a diary, and Bobby Kennedy, she got a hold of it, and in the diary he had all of his conquests, and there was supposedly something like 70 conquests in there, and that's supposedly when she committed suicide, when she saw the 70 number. It seems like they have something along that line. The really bad stuff, and maybe this other stuff is just kind of a reminder. The floozy newsy stuff is just a reminder. But to get this guy in after writing the Fauci book, that's some serious compromise.
Absolutely. I don't know who we should be calling. This is Jeffrey Taubenberger here with the TWIV guy. This is a 2-hour interview. We could maybe watch a little of it somewhere.
Sure.
I'm not sure what's.
Sure. We play a little bit.
But just to sum up what we've discussed here, for a wider audience, if they were going to jump in and just hear a little clip, it's Maha, you're off the rails. Maha, get this thing back on track. I don't know if I'm calling out to Ian Carroll or I'm calling out to that Shannon or whatever her name, the Google Shannon lady, the one who is his vice presidential candidate or whatever. I don't know who the leader of Maha is, but Maha is a little off the rails right now, if you ask me. And
Maha is haha right now with Taubenberger appointment. I can only call it as I see it. You got to just call balls and strikes, and not really. You can't look at the uniform of what the players are wearing when you're calling balls and strikes. You just got to say, is it in the strike zone or it isn't? And this one's right down the middle. It's a strike. I mean, this is a poisoner in chief.
Yeah, but maybe it's more of you hire him and then you get his phone contacts, and you find out who he's talking to, and you just can keep an eye on him a little better, and maybe find something to use against him.
The canary trap idea that Mark's talking about is a possibility. That's how you get to know the network. It's going to be the bodies piling up is going to be the key thing. If you remember, they took the guy, and I can't remember his name, for the Russian Minister of Warfare. It was talking about bioagents. He was talking about the biolabs, and they blew him up on that little scooter bomb in Moscow. They killed him.
It wouldn't have been Lavrov then. I was thinking maybe Sergei Lavrov, but
he's the foreign minister. But the guy who was doing the daily briefings on the war in Ukraine, he was talking about the biolabs.
Mm-hmm.
Kumetsov, or I can't remember his name, but they blew him up. But Aaron, the one thing would be nice. Krillo, I think somebody said Krillo. Kirilov. Yeah, I think his name is Kirilov. And find out who got the money for Moderna for the flu vaccine. That's another one of those early indicators where, remember how Rick Bright got the big order, the big mRNA order at the Millikan Institute?
Mm-hmm.
He got the big, and they ordered all the I can't remember, remdesivir. Remember they
exhaust the supply, because only if the supply of remdesivir was exhausted would they be able to usher in the mRNA. They had to have inability to buy any more remdesivir, so they bought it all up.
That's right, in January, and that's your thing. I mean, the Millikan Institute. That's why we're here. I mean, the Millikan Institute is when Jill Biden says Trump's a dummy for firing everybody at CDC. Everybody's going to say nobody knows she has a hamster husbandry degree. She's going to come out and say, as a PhD, Trump fired all these people in surveillance. That's how this thing got out of control. You could just see it coming, right? You could almost write her speech for the plenary speech, right? And now look, it's out of control. And I don't know whether there's a military games going on, or if there's a NATO defender. There is a big NATO thing. Yeah, this is Kirilov getting blown up.
Yeah, I guess for mature audiences only here, folks. This is the moment a top Russian general accused of using chemical weapons was killed in Moscow. So he comes out the door here. Ukraine security footage, and there's the blast. And
well, that's propaganda, because he wasn't accused of using bioweapons. He was accusing the Ukrainians of using the bioweapons. Sure. Yeah, they
always try to flip the script, of course, but this was the first video I could find real quick, I guess, on the fly as always, right? But yeah, continue. Sorry, Kirilov, yep. Oh, did we lose you? Might have muted you there. Did we lose you? I think we lost.
Yeah, here. There you go. All these things are operations, and the thing about operations are like a D-Day or something. You've seen all the guys where they all synchronize their watches. It's more than one person, and it's a large orchestrated operation that's happening. So you don't get a chance once the operation's launched to say to go backwards. Once she says Rumpelstiltskin or whatever Jill Biden's going to say at the Millikan conference here, once she says that word, like Joe Biden saying dark winter, it's rolling forward. There's no going backward. Shuang Wu is doping those air conditioning filters, and York Air Conditioning is the field engineers are going out and putting those in the hospital. DHS is requiring the hospitals to change their filters. All this is going to happen like lockstep, right? Like it did before. So that's how we want to get in front of these things to say, oh, here are the places you're going to get it. Probably government buildings for sure. This is the thing about Trump too, with the first 100 days, this goes into what we were talking about yesterday. If I have the people that are running the maintenance facilities and they're all, Joe Biden appointees, and they all report to SES executives that were all, Obama appointees and so forth, I can tell them not to respond to any Trump I can tell them not to put up Trump's picture. I can tell them to change the air filters. We have all government buildings, federal, state, local. I could tell my friends not to be in the building. Jill Biden can be the messenger here for a nasty live exercise. I think this live exercise is going to be worse than coronavirus.
If she says Satchel Paige, then we know we really
Yeah, she says Satchel Paige.
Biden with the Pope mentioning Satchel Paige, and it's like, what is he talking about right now? You remember the scene? Maybe I'll have to play it.
Yeah, I would like to see
That was another one of those where it's like, why is this even coming up?
I think if you think about the dynamics of the last election, where did Biden lose the traditional Democratic strongholds? Black men over 40, right? And Hispanic men across the board. And every black man in America knows who Satchel Paige is, right? They have lived through civil rights. They've been through the real discrimination, right? Not the fake discrimination. And so when you say Satchel Paige, that shows that the president knows my pain, right? So here we go.
I think this was more like you're saying, the triggering of an operation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see.
Joe Biden will be making the rounds. When you hear Joe Biden say Satchel Paige, the operation begins. No turning back.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly.
Famous African-American baseball player. His name was Satchel Paige. The commanding officer said, Satch, no one's ever pitched to win at age 47. How do you feel about pitching to win on your birthday? He looked at me and said, boys, that's not how I look at age.
I'm sorry, what is
Boys, that's not how I look at age.
Ragazzi, non si guarda all'età.
I look at it this way.
It's like, okay, what?
How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
But that's like
It was a famous
thing.
that like someone's going to make a public appearance and they're going to use a code word and that's going to initiate an operation. I don't know. I mean, that's just me,
He threw a curveball to that translator woman. I mean, she was like, I don't know how to say, I'm confused.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Joe. What's calling a strike?
Yeah.
It's boy, can you give me a shine? That's right.
Well, that was way back when. Satchel Paige, I'm a Cleveland Indians fan, so I know the Satchel Paige story really well. I think they brought him up at 42. And he was famous. He was a great pitcher, and I think he's in the Hall of Fame now. They brought all the Black League players into the Hall of Fame. I think they combined the two Hall of Fames. It would be great if you could check that, Aaron, but I'm pretty sure they did. Like cool pop. Go ahead.
I'm just like the Negro League, that was all out of Wilson. Okay, that they had to segregate the baseball because, like, prior to like 1920, there was no racism in baseball. That was just like the military got segregated. That was all Woodrow Wilson and World War I that brought all of that segregated, and then Truman got rid of it after World War II.
That's right.
I didn't want to get us too far off track. We can bring that. Maybe that'll be for our fun, Saturday or Sunday show.
Well, exactly. Like why they had to combine those records in that because baseball was divorced for several years, and finally with the end of separate but equal brought the end of this segregated baseball that had been created because there wasn't really any Major League Baseball past St. Louis, and it was all up in the northeast corner of the country. That was the major leagues. Things changed.
I always said if there had been segregated leagues, I would have played in the NBA. So thank God for a lot of the white players until Jackie Robinson and stuff, because a lot of them wouldn't have made the major leagues if the black leagues had been into the major leagues. But Satchel Paige was famous for saying, don't ever look over your shoulder; they may be gaining on you. That was he had a lot of great sayings, and he won a lot of games in his 40s in the major league. That shows you how good he was when he was in his 20s and 30s. And he was always
There's
Good.
got to be a George. I'm sorry. There's got to be a Joe Gargiola and Satchel Paige interview somewhere out there in the
Yeah.
YouTube, you know.
We'll find that there. More
Yeah.
so, just I didn't want to take us too far off track. It's just the
But
Biden.
that's why Biden said the
waiting.
name. That's why Biden said the name, because
Right.
here's Pope Francis, and they're going to record this. This is going to go back to America, and I'm going to appeal to black guys that are over 40, because Trump was winning that demographic, and that's you cannot lose that demographic if you're if you're a Democrat. No way.
Well, here she is. Certainly, we've got our eye on Dr. Jill Biden. She will be at the Millikan Institute. We've always got our eye on the Millikan Institute, Milken Institute, and she will be joining as its chair. As this was just yesterday that this came out, so trying to stay on top of that. Always watching the Biden.
I was at the Millikan Institute yesterday because I was trying to find out what this was going to be, and this had not been announced yet. But everywhere you go in Los Angeles, everywhere you go. But I was down at Cedar Sinai on Melrose, or not on Melrose, 3rd Avenue, near Beverly Hills, near Adam Schiff, right? And I'm trying, it's coming from there. The next thing is coming from. It's going to be the Millikan Institute. This is where Rick Bright said we need an entity of excitement. So you don't have to be a genius to figure out where to be, but they hadn't made this announcement yet. So thank you, Aaron, because I was like, okay, I'm here. Is somebody going to make an announcement? And they hadn't made the announcement yet. But when Women's Health Network, now that takes me, I'm sorry to riff here, but that takes me over to Winburn with this breast cancer thing. And with this ductal cancer now, with the cancer can invenerate itself into the ducts of the woman's breast, right? And you can have actually stage 0 cancer. So this could be a big cancer push, right? And again, who's pushing the cancer vaccine right now? Look, it's DCIS is what it's called, ductal cancer. But it's even women who don't think they have a cancer, there's no lump, etc. There is this stage 0 diagnosis with DCIS, and now I can get with creating a mass formation psychosis again. Because most women are like, oh, I've had the mammogram. I don't have cancer. Now I could I'm not saying this is what she's going to say on Tuesday, but I could put a mass formation psychosis in the brain. There it is. There's DCIS, stage 0. And now I could say, oh, you need Dr. Sun Shang. You need, because who has the cancer lab in Winburn? It's Dr. Sun Shang has the lab. See the clouding there? See the clouding there? Right? Dr. Sun Shang has that lab, and Dr. Sun Shang has Activa, and he's done the 100-minute infomercial with our good friend, see up in the corner? He's done our 100-minute commercial with Tucker. That had to cost some money. So this is maybe what she announces tomorrow for the cancer vaccine. We'll see. Maybe not tomorrow. I think it's the 4th it starts, but we're going to be here tomorrow. We start tomorrow, May 1st, with our charrette. So we're going to be covering this.
We'll have to do some extra shows, some charrette extra scheduled show programming, maybe Friday or Saturday or Sunday night. Try to get you with all the charrette folks and do a roundtable kind of thing. But let's play a little bit from the Jeffrey Taubenberger video there, if we could. We'll hear him in his own words with what's his name of TWIV this week in virology.
Ron Escudo, yeah.
His name, yeah, he's really something.
I that's how I learned my initial virology, is listening to his podcast, Ron Escudo podcast. Yeah. I listened to about 40 of them, and he, the traditional virology, but Trump's an idiot and all that. Yeah.
They're so anti-Trump, and they were so, pro-mask, pro-vaccine, pro, eradication of personal freedoms and liberties.
Yep.
that, it was like, wow, this is a tough podcast for most people to watch. But it did obviously gain a lot of popularity during the pandemic.
It did.
But we'll just a few minutes here where he's discussing his work with the Spanish flu.
Encouraging people at the Smithsonian and other natural history museums to do that, to go back and look at avian viruses in collections using next generation, non-PCR based strategies. I think that would be important.
Great. That would be. Now, you have virus. You've had virus for many years. And you mentioned earlier this pandemic was particularly virulent. So do we learn anything about that by studying the viruses that you recovered?
I think that we have. I think that what we can agree is that while it was, particularly pathogenic in people, it is particularly pathogenic in experimental animal models like mice, which is unusual for seasonal or human-adapted influenza viruses, which tend to have to be adapted to mice through extensive serial passage before they can become pathogenic.
PR8, right?
Yeah, like PR8, which is really now a kind of a mouse virus. The 1918 virus, just without adaptation, is really pathogenic in mice. It's really pathogenic in ferrets. It's really pathogenic in non-human primates. It's just kind of an inherently pathogenic virus.
Okay.
So the logical thought initially would be, since it was such an unusual pandemic, there must be, some key set of mutations that made it so pathogenic. So if we could align it with other sequences, we could go, aha, eureka, here's the mutation that relates. So through extensive work, what we can say is that it's a really good flu virus. It replicates really well. It has a really efficient polymerase. It also expresses a very avian-like H1 subtype hemagglutinin with hardly any non-synonymous changes from a typical avian consensus H1 you would find in a duck pond, half a mile away from here. So, except for these receptor binding changes. But so in my lab, we did an experiment about a dozen years ago or so with Chi Li. And what she did was she took the 1918 genome and she made a set of rescue viruses in which we replaced one of the 8 gene segments at a time with the sort of a typical low-path avian influenza virus from wild ducks. So no mammalian adaptation, with the idea that, that would certainly tell us something about host adaptation and possibly virulence. What you find is that 7 of those 8 gene segments, in which 1918 has 1 avian gene segment, do not attenuate the virus at all. And only 1 did, and that was PB2. And we know that the PB2 at its C-terminal end has some changes that are important for getting the RNA polymerase into the nucleus, since flu virus replicates in the nucleus unusually. And that changes a glutamic acid to lysine change at amino acid 627. And human viruses, including 1918, have that, and avian viruses tend not to have that. And if you make that 1 nucleotide change in the avian PB2 segment and put it in with the rest of 1918, it is 1918. So then we thought, well, that's just crazy, because we knew that the polymerase was an important factor, but we also had very good evidence that the hemagglutinin was a big virulence factor. Because if you took just the 1918 hemagglutinin and put it on the backbone of a seasonal virus, which causes no disease in mice, it kills mice. It kills ferrets. So the hemagglutinin was a major factor. We started by making these chimeras with avian H1s, and so we would take, the HA1 domain and the HA2 domain, or, the untranslated regions or the transmembrane domains, and, make these chimeras to say, well, maybe you could narrow down where the changes are. And every chimera was just as pathogenic. So we tried a whole bunch of avian H1 viruses. As long as they're on a mammalian adapted backbone, they're as pathogenic as 1918. And one of those features is that they induce an extremely strong neutrophilic infiltrate very early on in the lung. It's really unusual for RNA viruses to induce a strong neutrophilic infiltrate. Mostly it's a monocytic lymphocytic infiltrate. And so 1918 characteristic is this huge number of neutrophils in the lung, seen in 1918 autopsies. That's what you see in mouse lungs. We see in non-human primate lungs, and ferret lungs. But what we now conclude, and what I think, is that its virulence is an accident. The accident was that an avian virus that is not pathogenic in its native host in birds is accidentally pathogenic in a pro-inflammatory way in mammals and in humans. And what we now know through extensive studies where we've looked at H1 through 16, all the different subtypes of hemagglutinin in birds, and looking at this, is that H1s share the feature with 1918, but also H6, H7, and H10. So when H7 and 9 started causing human outbreaks, I was very concerned that it has the kind of characteristics of high mortality that the 1918 H1N1 had. So I now think that if you think teleologically about adaptation, if an avian virus is quote unquote wanting to, and I'm sorry for being anthropomorphic, but wanting to adapt to a mammal, being able to replicate in those cells, infect those cells efficiently to make progeny virus and then transmit them from one host to another would all be areas where there would be strong selection pressures. But if a flu virus, which has its peak replication at a couple of days, maybe shed the virus for 5 days, and then is no longer present, if you then subsequently get a secondary bacterial pneumonia and then subsequently die at day 12 or day 14, again, speaking anthropomorphically, what does the influenza virus care if you died if it's on to another person?
Let's leave it right there. You think?
Well,
Is
I have a
it
couple
hurt?
comments on
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would. I got a few graphics too I can bring up while you're chatting.
Yeah,
So-
and make sure you bring up that graphic about Moderna getting the big check, the couple $100 million check for H5N1 mRNA, because that's what the Hegelian dialectic says is going to happen, right? That we know that we have problem, proposed solution, immediate proposed solution, mass formation psychosis, immediate proposed solution, immediate check. That we're now seeing the check being written even before the proposed solution, right? Even before the mass formation psychosis. So that's going to be important. Moderna is going to be a winner here. But my point on these genes is all of this discussion happened for coronavirus as well. And the people who really knew and had the Nobel Prizes said, don't show me any of these variations and the technical details and so forth. 500 million. And that, guess who that's coming from? HHS. That's Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy wrote do people know this? Do people know Bobby Kennedy wrote a $590 million check to Moderna for for bird flu, for H5N1? Do people know that? That's almost $1 billion. Do people know that? What's the date on that, Aaron? I can't read it. I'm on my phone here.
I've even got another one that just came out 13 hours ago. They're getting another 176 million for another mRNA for this.
Well, so those are your Rick Bright moments. You know, you don't have to. What is the date on that?
This is today. HHS announces plan to pay Moderna 176 million for mRNA flu vaccine, which really like 176 million for Moderna. You know, probably, I mean, buys a couple of dumpsters and I mean, who knows what that pays at Moderna. That's a lot of money, but also, you know, we used to talk in the trillions in a sense.
Well, $590 million is $590 million more dollars than I have. You know, it's $590 million more dollars than you and Mark have.
Yeah, amen.
I would take one of those million. You know, they've already got all my money. But my point here is, that's a lot of dough ski. I mean, that's news. I think we're the only one, I mean, that really are talking about this as far as putting the dots together here. But my point is, it's all of these things can be discussed, you know, which gene, all this thing. But the furin cleavage sites was the thing that the Soviets were working on, which means once I do get that infection, then I want to have that secondary arm latch on, the superantigenic effect or whatever you want to call it. And when he's saying your body's first responders are either lymphocytes or neutrophils, okay, when you have an invasion of your body's antibodies into the lungs, one of the bad side effects of that is that your lungs get eaten away, whether it's lymphocytes, macrophages, or whatever, and it reduces your breathing capacity. when I had Legionnaires protesting mRNA cancer vaccines in front of National Resilience in San Diego, here come the lymphocytes, or here come the T cells, or here come the neutrophils, and they're like little Pac-Men. They don't distinguish, and they fill up the lung, and then they reduce the lung's carrying capacity. So this takes out normally people that are older who already have limited capacity, that are already on oxygen, right? And then kind of, thins the herd that way. But the interesting thing about the Spanish flu is it took out, this 100 years ago technology, more than 100 years ago, 105 years ago now, it took out fighting age males.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it took out fighting age males. And the thing I attribute it with, what made it airborne, was smoking. Up until that time, cigarettes had not been, used much. People rolled their own and so forth. But the where the manufacturing of cigarettes really went up was World War One. Just because, people are nervous, when's the next shelling going to happen? I think I'm going to have a cigarette before I die, go ahead, Mark.
Women were sick of the cuspidors and the chewing tobacco and the spit and all of that. So the smoking became like a cleaner way, and not as smelly as cigars, to have your tobacco.
Right.
Because chewing, my grandfather chewed, and you spit in the can, and it was gross. And
my dad chewed. I'd have to go to the store sometime and get chew for him. So yeah, so I remember the spittoons and everything, and I definitely prefer smoke. But my point is that how do you target, if you're the German high command, right? These Americans are coming, whether you like it or not. Right? Would you rather they stop in Boston and New York, in those harbors and in sick bays, and they don't send over massive waves of troops, and so that we win? Or do you want all of them to come over, the doughboys to come over, or do you want all the GIs to come over in World War II and tip the balance for England? Is that what you want? Then so we have to look at motivation here, and now we have the same thing going on with World War III here. Is like, do you want the Russians to win, or do you want Ukraine to be in NATO? The motive is there to spray this on the Russians, and the whole reason why I wrote Dr. StrangeBlood this morning is that's a very risky game, because it's not just like the old days where they all got on a train like Yuri Zaitsev, and went back to Leningrad on the train. Everybody's flying all around now. It's not the same as it was in 1918. And that's why Jill Biden here, she might be talking about that. She might be talking about something else. Also, women smoking. The other piece of this is, this could be all just cover for, like what Mark is saying, is it could be in the cigarettes. It could be in the vaping. If you want to take out young military age men, you would go after Bob Malone and Vapor Bar, You would go after Jewel and Andrew. What was that guy's name? Andrew Huff. Yeah, you would go after Andrew Huff, and you would go after Bob Malone with Vapor Bar. You would go after the youth with the American youth. So, which again could have, could have been being prepared for the Russians. These are all things we don't know yet, but we know the Milliken Conference is coming. That's where the entity of excitement speeches usually happen. And we're seeing the checks being written for H5N1. So here in California, by the way, they've already started stockpiling. And then the other one is Arcturus. Arcturus has its own replicase it's self-amplifying, and Arcturus you can store at room temperature. The one when I was in front of National Resilience, they share a putting green with Arcturus in La Jolla. So Arcturus is the other, and this whole mystery, this E Valley, this is known as the E Valley mystery, where all these people die in 33 states. This thing isn't out, we're not out of the woods yet on this, because in order to create a mass formation psychosis, you could put something in the vape, right? And then say it's a virus. So we have to watch all these things, unfortunately, across the board.
Yep, it's been a fascinating last few years, and we fear that despite the efforts of Maha and all the cheerleading of Maha, that we do need to stay on guard. Things are not necessarily changing the way we wanted them to. I did want to switch gears just a little bit before we let you go here,
Sure.
if we could, or Mark, I was going to switch to Trump in Michigan yesterday.
Sure.
Just, we did the watch party. We watched most of his speech together. Folks can go on the YouTube channel and review that if they want. It was not exactly the most earth-shattering speech like I thought it might be. It might be one of those seminal speeches in American history, but not exactly. Just a good coming together and an excited 100-day celebration and everything. But one outcome that I think is, this is happening whether we like it or not, is the Trump Gretchen Whitmer love fest. You know about this? How now Trump and Whitmer, and I don't know. I mean, this is, again, is it like keep your friends close, your enemies closer, art of the deal, what have you? But they're just besties now. Trump and Whitmer are loving each other, and to me, it's like, oh man, she's going to be the nominee. It's going to be Gretchen Whitmer 2028. They're not going to let AOC do it. They see AOC catching steam. And it's like, no, AOC. They might let AOC look. He hugs her, a big hug. Yeah, I mean, they're just, and she gives a speech. I'll go to the speech that she gave at Selfridge. The two of them together. But this is kind of a thing now. Trump is really, putting it to Whitmer that, like, they're gonna be sort of buddy. I don't know if you've caught on to this or not, or what you think of it, but it is a thing. And just
well, if you remember, I went to a Middle River where there was an A-10 base, and the A-10s were made, I think Republic aircraft on Long Island made the A-10, I think. But we had done a kind of going back, looking at the compromise activities on Long Island, going all the way back, Glen Cove, that kind of middle Long Island, Bethpage area. And it's interesting that they're back here on aviation, because again, they're taking the A-10s out and they're putting the F-15s in. This was the Anthrax base. I think it was Selfridge, wasn't it, where they had all the Anthrax for Iraq 2.
Escoda.
Oh, the Escoda. Okay.
Yeah, Escoda also. Well, my point is that the Northern Michigan Fairchild Republic A-10, Fairchild Republic, Fairchild.
Or maybe it was the Warthog. Actually, I made.
Yeah, well, the Warthog is the A-10. That's the nickname for the A-10. But yeah, it was. They were in the middle of Long Island, and this was the original using the Russian girls, to try. I'm sorry, using compromise operations on Long Island. This is Long Island serial killer in 1968. I mean, this how far back the aviation compromise operations go is with the Warthog A-10. Now it's a great plane, and I don't think they should get rid of it, because I think it's an infantryman's friend. But my point is that if you get rid of something that delivered chemical weapons, and there's chemical weapons at Selfridge, and I don't know if there is or there isn't. But again, now I can trigger operations on Trump. Right now, that's continuity of government. As soon as I trip anything involving chemical weapons, biological weapons, or radioactive weapons, if they're nuclear capable, if the new F-15s are nuclear capable, anything, now I can. And again, my special access program can be something totally unrelated to the F-15s. Totally unrelated. As long as there's weapons of mass destruction, I can trigger continuity of government. So him landing there and being lured to Selfridge could trigger continuity of government. And again,
He's lured to Selfridge. Maybe he lured her. Maybe he's luring her. She's luring
well,
him. I don't know. I guess it would be.
I mean, I don't see,
Mhm.
you know, I want to know where the A-10s have been in Ukraine and why they're decommissioning them, because one of the big problems they had, I think Mark's correct with the Skoda, where they had so many people get sick with anthrax in, maybe it was the second Gulf War, not the first, is because that was the base that dumped most of that dumped most of the anthrax. And if you want to go back all the way to Rumsfeld in the Iraq-Iran war, it was probably the A-10 because it's slow and it's got a titanium tub in it, so you can just shoot at an A-10 all you want, unless you hit the propeller or the engine. It's lined in titanium, so it's like Superman with bullets bouncing off its chest, and that is what you want. You want something low and slow for dispersal of anthrax. So maybe this is the switch out all the anthrax delivery systems from Ukraine. This is, look, Kirilov is going to be right. They were in the time we've been citizen journalists, they've gone from, I think it was 12 when we were following Dilyana, 12 bioweapons labs, to something like 40 with Black and Veatch and Metabiota and all the ones they were building. What are they doing at those plants? What bases? Are they all playing pinochle, or are they trying out some of the newer technology that we've talked about? What did I just see about the University of Michigan, where they have arrested an Iranian guy or a Chinese guy, spy at University of Michigan?
Oh wow, I didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
Yeah, look at the spy just got arrested there. Anytime I see the enemy like this warming up to you, that's a very bad sign. That means an operation's underway. Now, if they say Satchel Paige today at the at the Milligan conference, I'm really going to be worried. Or Dark Winter, if they say Dark Winter. But I want to know where those A-10s have been. I want to know what flight wing, and if that wing has been, because a lot of them were a National Guard up there. So I'm wondering about activated National Guard, and I'm wondering if they've been to Ukraine or not, if those planes have been, because I remember this before, and I can't remember the kid who, with Dylan Klebold, the other
Eric
kid with
Dylan Klebold, you mean Columbine shooting?
Yeah. What was the other kid's name?
Eric Harris.
Harris, yeah, Harris. His dad was a big anthrax pilot, and his dad, remember they Paul Whelan and everything, they left a Skoda. I think Mark's right, he was at a Skoda, and they went to what, that little town way the hell out there in Colorado. It was Columbine, but it was Lockheed.
Was it Fort Collins where the
No, it was, well, Columbine. It was I can't remember the name of the town, but Lockheed had a big operation there. Yeah, well, they had a big operation there, and it was all about anthrax, and it was about anthrax clumping, and they were trying to get over the aerosolization of anthrax. And his dad was involved in that. And again, that's another thing, is I can substitute now a guy I can have Klebold running around with an automatic weapon in the cafeteria, and then I can have as many guys in Black Bloc going through and killing everybody. I'm not saying they didn't do that, but Harris hardly fired his weapon at all, right? And there was another guy dressed like Harris. This is what I'm saying. Anytime you bring anthrax into the picture, now I can run any kind of operation I want. The same thing with Sandy Hook. This is what I said about Sandy Hook and the two guys in Black Bloc, where there was what's his name had help. As soon as you start talking about a DARPA program, right? And if it was an anthrax vaccine program that they were giving to all those kids, I don't know what screwed up those kids so bad. But what my point is I can, as soon as Lanza shoots his mother, I can lock him into, I can pick him up at his house. I can shoot him in the front seat. I can dress up somebody else's Lanza. I can put a mask on him and everybody says it's Lanza. And he's the patsy everybody's going to find in the parking lot. They took down the whole school.
Right.
So go ahead with Harris here. I think you got something about
a
Harris.
Michigan pastor. He used to live across the street from the family of the Colorado shooter, Eric Harris. Says he knew the family, Eric Harris, another teen. This is here. Stone says that Wayne Harris, an Air Force pilot who flew refueling tanker planes from Wurtsmith, appeared to be a good father. So
Wurtsmith. That's it. But Wurtsmith has another name.
Okay.
Wurtsmith has another name.
Mm-hmm. But that is where I remember that, and it was the refueling. He was a refueling.
And refueling tankers is the distribution. It can be used. They were going to try to use, they did it in Vietnam. I can't remember all the different rainbow colors, but with Agent Orange, but they were going to use refueling tankers because they were already, you've already got tanks.
Low and slow, baby. Low and slow. I mean, it's
and then you just needed
fast and planes, but low and slow, like you always say. I mean, sometimes you need low and slow, and when you're aerosolizing and dispersing,
yes,
that's what you need, right?
Fast is your enemy because it clumps too quickly. Mm-hmm. You want the firemen going through like a parade, throwing the candy out to the kids. You want it to disperse on the pavement,
mm-hmm.
And low and slow is the way to go. So as soon as I see Gretchen Whitmer hugging Donald Trump, I immediately go to where those A-10s been. Where the hell have those A-10s been? Like, that should never happen in any logical world. Where the hell have those A-10s been?
Well,
and then they can't get that shit out of there. They had
mm-hmm.
there was one of those places where they were burning the planes. Again, another one of these mass school shooters, and the father was involved in the burning the planes. Where they're simulating a fire crash.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried burning it and they couldn't get rid of it all. They've got to take the whole thing and send it to China. Otherwise, you leave evidence of the anthrax.
Fascinating stuff. Well, yeah,
you can't get rid of all the spores. The spores are so hardy that they just hang around.
Is it real or is it Memorex? This Gretchen Whitmer and Trump.
She's real. This is real.
Could they have maybe they moved some planes from Ukraine to Michigan, and the planes in Michigan are getting moved to Ukraine? Because I heard that a lot of this Ukraine thing is a move to deplete NATO and essentially run them out of toys to play with. So,
well, that's another possibility, Mark. That's a great point, is that this frees up planes to give them to NATO. And then they give the old stuff to Ukrainian pilots. They certainly don't want it like the Gulf War II, where you got Ed Harris's father distributing and flying the anthrax runs. You want a Ukrainian pilot doing that,
mm-hmm.
right? You want to say, oh, this is a weird Azov guy who works for Kolomoisky. He's a rogue commander like Sterling Hayden was in Dr. Strangelove. He's a weird base commander, and he got a hold of some anthrax from Saddam Hussein's old stores, and he was spraying Russian brigades. If it ever comes back, the thing is flu-like symptoms here,
mm-hmm.
right? So people getting sick, but that doesn't mean they're all dying. So this will be interesting to watch to see what happens to those A-10s.
So I'll play a few minutes here. I don't think Trump will exactly tell us what happened to the A-10s or if they're in Ukraine or not, but at least we will get a little bit of a sense of him at Selfridge yesterday. He'll give us a little background of Selfridge. We'll do 3 or 4 minutes of this and then do a few comments and be on our way.
Sure. Yeah.
Huh?
And again, I've written about all these things on my Substack, and at Substack, georgewebb.substack.archive/archive. I'm adding tabs. I just added a tab for LISK. People say, I don't know how to find the Long Island serial killer stuff. I just added a tab for LISK, right? So you can see the tabs go across the top, and I'm going to keep adding tabs and sections so you can just go right to the stuff that you want to look into.
This is where to
Okay.
get use here, folks. Substack.com, George Webb Substack. $8 a month, the best $8 you could spend on
You
the
can try
internet.
it for free. Try it for free, but then remember, I can't eat my
Never.
shoelaces forever.
And for folks who, can maybe afford more than $8 a month, to the extent that George does put it all out there for free, knowing that, everyone's not able to afford the $8, you can always, give a little more than $8.
There's a sponsor that you can give more. I can't remember what the maximum is, but there's a sponsor thing. It's like $20 a month or 25. Yeah.
But here we'll do a little clip of Donald Trump telling us about Selfridge, where he was yesterday. I think there's actually more interesting information in his speech at Selfridge to the National Guard than there was at his rally, just in my opinion. But we'll watch a few minutes of this, do a few comments, and be on our way. So
Yeah, I think this is the reason for the trip, by the way, not that thing
Yeah.
yesterday. Yeah, because yesterday was just a standard stump speech. It didn't really scour.
Right, but this was an interesting one. Yeah.
Done, and I think we will. For decades, Selfridge Air National Guard Base has stood as a crucial pillar of North American air defense, just 20 miles north of Detroit, where you're going to have a lot of car factories opening very soon, by the way, I might add, with access to the largest military airspace complex east of the Mississippi. Selfridge is tightly integrated with the National All-Domain Warfighting Center. This airfield saw its first military takeoff all the way back in 1917. Can you believe that? Wow. Wouldn't that have been a shame to close this great history for something else that wouldn't be as good? The Tuskegee Airmen trained here during World War II, and generations of Michigan patriots have served here with great distinction. Unfortunately, that proud legacy was put at risk by the retirement of the key aircraft based here, in particular the A-10 Thunderbolt II Warthog, which I hear is an incredible plane. It's too bad. It's a long time it's been up there. I said, why don't we save it? I actually said that last time, and we did save it. I said that in my last term, and we did save it, but now it's coming to an end. But I hear the Warthog is incredible. We have support aircraft and also the KC-135 strata tankers. In recent years, many in Michigan have feared for the future of the base. They've been calling everybody, but the only one that mattered was Trump. They called Trump and we got it done, which represents $850 million in economic impact across the state of Michigan, and probably it could be much more than that as we expand it out, and creates thousands and thousands of good and important jobs, both in the military and civilian jobs. So Gretchen, that's a big economic, you're not going to have too many economic development jobs like that. It's great. But today I've come in person to lay to rest any doubts about Selfridge's future and the vital role it'll play in our national defense. As Commander-in-Chief, I'm proud to announce that very soon we will replace the retiring A-10 Warthogs with 21 brand new F-15EX Eagle II fighter jets, the best in the world, fresh off the line.
I think that's good right there, huh? Announcement of the new jets.
Yeah. Well,
Warthog.
the strata tankers, C-130, and the 135 is the Marine version, I think. But those are also great ways to disperse anthrax. So we got to watch this anthrax. Gretchen Whitmer wouldn't be pushing for it if it wasn't, something. So I'm going to keep I'm going to keep a watch on Selfridge.
My hope there is that, if it to counter that, what if it wasn't anthrax? I think maybe just angling for the Democratic nomination. Now that you're saying all this, now my mind is turning like, whoa, could there be something way deeper? And it's like, yeah, I've obviously got to consider that. But before we talked, as I saw it playing out yesterday, I was just like, oh man, she's trying to middle everything. She's trying to become Mrs. Middle to the American people. Hey, look, Trump likes me. I'm a soft Democrat. I'm not like AOC. That was the sort of like on its face angle that I was seeing playing out.
Well, she went to the White House not too long ago, and she was hiding her face and doing,
But
weird.
she needed to repair that a little bit. Exactly. It's like they
Yeah.
have one in. Now we've got another one. So I don't know, but I mean, definitely the deeper angle of the anthrax and the dispersal and all the history of Wordsmith and Oscoda and everything with the Air Force.
But notice with this school shooting thing.
Mhm.
I want to. Here's Paul Whelan at Oscoda. Again, you can have an assassins group if you have Q level clearance. If you have a secure access program and you have a WMD, you can have a State Department assassins group. He can recruit assassins. So he's with Harris in Oscoda, and then they go to Littleton. I think it's Littleton, Colorado, is where I'm thinking the Lockheed base is. And all of a sudden, the school shooter program moves with them. The only way that could happen is if the secure access program moved with them. The only way that could happen is if it could be triggered by anthrax. It's a WMD, and now I can move the assassin with, because Paul Whelan is who did the school exercise at Littleton, Colorado, and that starts all of the school shooting in 1999. That starts all of the school shooting, right? And so this is why I say anytime you trip that anthrax, this is why they had the anthrax out at Flight 93, right? On 9/11, that allowed them to walk away from the WTC, the weapons convention, the bioweapons convention. That allowed them to start gain of function. So is this Littleton?
I'll read it. With more than 14,000 employees in Colorado, Lockheed Martin is a leader in aerospace defense and advanced technology across Colorado. Our teams in Denver, Boulder, Littleton, and Colorado Springs drive innovation in deep space exploration, satellite technology, missile defense, cybersecurity, and AI-driven autonomy, advancing national security and global stability. So,
and Trump said something else very important, which was the one. Did you hear him say the One Warfare Center?
I missed it. No, we'll have to check it
the,
later.
The One Warfare Center is, and I did a fishing trip with a guy who they're a colonel from the I won't say anymore, but
okay.
but the Pentagon has these guys who look at all of the capabilities across land, air, and sea. I might have given out too much, but they report directly to the Joint Chiefs, and then they rationalize what the best way to attack is. Even though you could do it all yourself, if you're Air Force, they say, well, we could do that also easier and cheaper with Army helicopter than putting a jet into it. Oh, okay. We'll save the jets for something else, right? And they rationalize the warfare. And this is where I'm saying you got to look at drones. Drones is the new capability, the Palmer Luckey Anduril drones and the MQ-9 Reaper. That's why I've got the MQ-9 Reaper in the Dr. StrangeBlood story. And also James Jameson's tried to kill us 3 times. All of our citizen journalists, he tried to kill us 3 times. So, I mean, that's also good metadata. But look out for the AI drones. And the other thing about it is you don't have that Pilot Harris problem anymore, coming back with anthrax symptoms. If the MQ-1 or the MQ-9 Reaper drone comes back, there's no pilot that gets sick.
Sure.
The only people that are getting sick, and if you put a robot in there loading the tanks on it, and there's no secrecy problem. There's no pilot that knows about the secret mission, and the robot doesn't tell anybody they loaded anthrax. This one, and the other thing about over there where Trump spoke in Warren, Michigan, is that the Palmer Luckey.
And this is the MQ-9 Reaper capability.
Okay, that's the General Atomics one. He's over there by the Innovation Center. What's the TMAC? Oh, I can't remember what the name of it is again. But which one?
TACOM?
TACOM. The TACOM, the Tactical Air Command. And the Tactical Air Command is where all the RoboCop, the Cybertruck looks like a RoboCop vehicle because it looks like a bullet deflecting RoboCop. RoboCop was filmed in Detroit, And Trump's speech wasn't far from the take on. I've been to Warren, I think 3 times with the Trump speeches. Not far from the take home every time.
He loves it there, he always goes back. Yeah. Sorry.
Right. It's not far. And again, if you want to go over to, I think the One Warfare Center is at the take home. I think the One Warfare Center is at the take home because this new, and again, if I hadn't talked to, and I don't want to get this guy in trouble, but the new thing is, hey, I have the plane come in and land or parachute out these little tanks, and the tanks don't have to be as big. They can be half the size. It's called mech war because there's no human driver. So it doesn't have to be as big. All it has to do is have treads and take the weapon and the ammunition to where it needs to go. And then you could have a drone army of tanks. You have the plane go like pretty close to where you need to go, and then you drop the little baby tanks in or MQ-9 Reaper. The only problem with the MQ-9 Reaper is it's just so expensive. It's really, really spendy. But General Atomics loves that. But look, that's why I say they wouldn't bring Palmer Luckey, right? They're bringing Palmer Luckey out of nowhere. He's doing Oculus VR. They gave him that from DARPA, right? And they're bringing Palmer Luckey into Columbus. And they're putting the new factory there. I think they wouldn't be doing that if they weren't trying to proxy this away from General Atomics. Because it in all sense and purposes, Aaron, it's just like a General Atomics. If you look at the Andrew Wheel drones and look out, this is the new warfare. This is why they want to keep the war going, is these autonomous drones and this One Warfare. Look at the One Warfare Center at the TACOM. Yeah, for the next show. We'll do that the next show.
I think it is it called One Warfare? I had it up here. Let's see. Is this one?
Well, Trump says it.
Integrated Logistics Support Center.
Trump says it in the speech.
Okay, I guess I got the Integrated Logistics Support Center, so hopefully that's the official name.
It's something different than that. But Trump said it, so I'll go back in this after we're done. But
sure,
Gretchen Whitmer isn't having him come in, right, to boost her ratings. Her base right now in Detroit, they're trying to drive a wedge with the UAW and so forth, and saying, look, we lost jobs because Trump came in, right? We lost, look at the layoff at Jeep, look at the blah, 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 right? I understand what you're saying. If this could be political positioning to push her into the middle, and I agree with that.
But that's just on the surface too. I do think there's something deeper, like you're saying, like that, that on its surface is just like, oh, okay, Whitmer and Trump, interesting bedfellows. Just put everybody's angling, positioning, but it's never that simple.
She can't run for governor again, so she's
right. That's why I think she'd be the presidential nominee, because she's term limited on the governor thing, so she's not going to have to fight for her governorship, and it's almost a natural progression for her. And as the Democrats are in disarray and everything, but beyond that, I like the thought that there's something deeper, because that's always the case. There's no way the two of them are collaborating without each of them having, something behind the scenes.
That's why I go back and say, is it real or is it Memorex?
Yeah. Remember, yeah, Ella Fitzgerald. Remember school shooting too. The kid, 13 years old, and they have all these kids pick on the kid, and then the dad says, well, here, take a gun, and those kids beat you up one more time, here's a gun, and that's out there too, near Selfridge. I went up there to that school. I can't remember the name of the kid, but that's where they were going to start holding the parents responsible.
Oh, the Oxford shooting with
Oxford, Michigan. I went up there. It's not far from Selfridge. Again, these things are very close to military bases, time and time again, and the military bases are involved in something wacky. So I'll just leave that for next time. The Oxford High School shooting. Yeah, I went up there.
You remember Kalshi? Remember we were doing the election? Remember Kalshi, the market? So Whitmer's at 6% right now. Here's your favorites for Democratic presidential nominee.
Who's
Gavin
the
Newsom.
who's
Newsom's a slight favorite, then AOC, then Josh Shapiro, then Buttigieg. Mark thinks it's going to be Buttigieg. Mark's definitely, he's got his stink eye out for Buttigieg. He thinks he's positioning with Gretchen Whitmer. And then you got Stephen A. Smith, the ESPN analyst, which is just weird. Kamala Harris, and then, Pritzker's on there, Mark Cuban, Fetterman. There's a long list going down, all these folks. Rahm Emanuel. Of course, Rahm Emanuel's on there, but I don't know. I think Whitmer, you can 6% on Whitmer. I might be hedging my bets in more ways than one with the Whitmer there. But this is always fun to look at, is these fun little politics markets.
Yeah, well, Gavin Newsom, with his handling of the fire here in California, I think that that'll just be an albatross around his neck. Shapiro in Pennsylvania is somebody to watch, but I think a VP candidate with Whitmer and Shapiro would be a strong ticket for them. I mean, it's at least she said, okay, I want to rebuild the roads, and if you do go around Michigan, there is work on the roads.
It is miserable getting through the traffic up in Metro Detroit. It's like you're in LA or New York right now, but
yeah,
I guess it might be a light at the end of the tunnel whenever the road work is ultimately done up there. But
she has put the money into the roads eventually. So that's, middle. She's a middle of the road candidate. So we'll leave it there. Yeah.
You comment? You want to do a couple here? I'll throw a couple.
Sure.
But because even with this real quick, like even that 591 million, like how much of it's research and how much of it's just grift? And even in these road projects, we're going to fix the road. Well, how much is going to actually fix the roads, and how much of it's just grift? You're just giving the money away. It doesn't really tangibly do anything.
It's Bobby Kennedy. So somebody had to have it on him. I do believe that her diary. Remember, they had Joe Biden's daughter's diary. Somebody got a hold of that.
Mm-hmm. I think that was O'Keefe also. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think they have the diary of his ex-wife, and that would be a killer. Something that got him, to write this check. That's a big check.
Yep. So here we'll just start with this comment here. I start a couple. Jill Biden at Rockford Center, a psychiatric hospital, while pursuing advanced degrees. In 1993, she joined Delaware Technical and Community College as an English instructor. Of course, Jill Biden, again, for those who might have missed it, at the Milken Institute here. Big announcements coming from the Milken Institute. George and the Charette will be there covering the event.
Don't forget her about her Secret Service. It was right out of The Wizard of Oz, where her Secret Service motorcycle cops accidentally got mixed up when Trump was coming in, and her motorcycle cops ended up going up to Butler.
What did I do? Yep.
And the two people that were wounded, left with those guys. So that was interesting. So anyway, watch out for her Secret Service. That's all I'm saying. That there's a couple of assassins in there.
That was another fascinating story that we
don't forget Joe's dogs.
Joe's
exactly.
Let's see here. We've got Kate says Ascota is where all the military planes and equipment came back from the Persian Gulf War. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, about 10% of them were fouled with anthrax, and they had been holdovers from the Iraq-Iran war. So that's something to follow.
Mm-hmm. We got Citizens Research here. Thanks for watching, Citizens Research. The A-10 is a piece of junk engineering-wise. Well,
I agree with that, but the titanium tub in for the pilot allows the pilot to think, unless it's like they got stingers, unless they've got some kind of advanced, if they've just got regular AK-47s.
Mm-hmm.
A-10 pilots think they're invincible. And what an infantry man cares about is hearing the plane, right? And then fire on the tank. Not so much like personnel to personnel. But if you can take out a tank, see, I'm an infantryman, right? I've got this much armor, nothing, right? I want you to take out the tanks that can shoot and don't have to hit me. They just have to be close. If you can take that 20 millimeter cannon and put about 50 of those 20 millimeter rounds into the tank and blow up the tank, I love you as an infantryman. So this is why infantrymen love the A10, because it's a tank buster, right? It's a
They
tank
call it
buster.
bathtub. I'm seeing here this titanium. They call it the titanium bathtub.
There it is. That's a titanium bathtub that the pilot sits in, and it gives the pilots. Let's say you do take a lot of fire. Oh, you just fly back. You just fly back, right? And then you're a hero, And the thing is, you're close enough where you can wave to the infantrymen, right? You're close enough where you can wave, and they see you and you see them, and that's why there's such a beloved relationship with the A-10 pilots. I went to the one in Middle River. Harold the Purple Crayon. Remember Harold the Purple Crayon that was stealing all the secrets for 20 years, putting all the files out of the NSA, the TAU, the Tailored Access Unit. He was bringing home all the Tailored Access Unit, and he got involved with cocaine and so forth up in Middle River. He had a pilot's license, and his pilot's license was at the A-10 base in Middle River, Maryland. The Purple Crayon, Harold the Purple Crayon, stealing all of our secrets. So, we've covered a lot of A-10 in our time here. As a matter of fact, I take it back. I talked to the guy who testified, a 2-star general, maybe he was a 3-star general. I worked for McChrystal and Associates, talked to him twice, met with him twice. It was at an Irish bar, so, McChrystal and Associates. But sometimes that's where you got to go to meet the generals, We're talking about a 2-star. Okay. And he testified in front of Congress to put in the F-35 and backfill with F-16s and F-15s to get rid of these A-10s. And I said, oh boy. And I'm talking with the guy who works for McChrystal Associates testifying in front of Congress. Okay. Not somebody who's not involved. Okay. And he goes, you know what? You're right. They love the A-10. The Army loves the A-10, but we got to get rid of them. This is 2020, 2019. We got to get rid of them. Pentagon wants the big tickets. The way you go up in the chain when past 2-star is you get big ticket items for the contractors. That's how you go up the chain. And the A-10 is cheap. And they hate the A-10 because it's cheap. It's cheap to maintain. It's not very well engineered, as I know this person's involved in aircraft design, and I know they're Eurofighter and so forth. I'm not saying that, but it's too cheap of a system. It's too effective and too cheap, and that's why they're getting rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff. So let's see a few more comments here. We've got Black Rabbit, also so close to Chi-Town. Maybe it's good leverage sideways. Let's see what Trump does. It's exciting, actually. Oh, Chi-Town, not Chi-Town. Chi-Town, Chicago. So
always watch out for Rahm Emanuel in Chi-Town.
Yeah.
Always watch out for the Chicago mob. Always, always, always. I agree with that 100%.
Lee Stranahan and Andy Dubois, possible victims. I'm not sure. Lee has been through some rough stuff, certainly recently. I don't know what he might have been a victim of, spraying, or I don't know.
Yeah, spraying. I mean, but it would have been right into his face in Washington when he had his strokes. Yeah, it's a very sad story.
Let's see. Watch out. PETA will come after your channel if you drag innocent animals into the picture. Okay, interesting. Well, I think we'll leave it right there.
They're the ones. They're the ones who drug the innocent animals into the picture. Did you see with the beagles? The guy he's right there in Hamtramck and right in that neighborhood. He's the guy who is killed all the beagles. Is the one leading the impeachment of Trump. I can't believe it. A beagle killer. Maybe that's why they had to bring Trump in, because the beagle killer running the articles of impeachment, that doesn't look good.
Certainly, yeah. I guess I lost my graphic. I'm a Shri Tanadar. I mean, we don't need to platform him anymore. He's trying as much as he can on his own. So, yeah, we will leave it right there. George, as always, thanks for everything. Folks can support George at substack.com. Check out his most recent article or posting today, Dr. StrangeBlood, as we dove into Dr. Jeffrey what was this? Taubenberger. They're the new NIAID chief for most of our show earlier today. So yeah, do please support George on Substack, and you can always buy him a coffee at buyhimacoffee.com. If you want to get involved with neighborhood news, we are having August citizen journalism camp out here for folks who are able to travel this summer, coming out in August to Michigan to be part of the journalism and all the great stuff we're doing here. You are all invited. More details to come later, or reach out to me for individualized details. Mark, any other comments on today's show? Any closing remarks?
Oh, I'm good.
Yeah,
It was
great.
very interesting. I'm big on the pandemic stuff. So I learned more than I
tour de force. Yeah, it is always a tour de force.
Thank you again, Mark, for making the great space available there in Michigan. It's so nice to have that kind of floor space. I really appreciate you guys.
Knocking the door during the show. We don't get too many customers. We get 3 to 5 customers a day coming in, checking out what we got and everything. So we lock the door during the show. So we'll unlock the door, and if you want to come and see what's going on here, 8015 Summerfield Road, corner of Summerfield and Secor, Lambertville, Michigan. You come here, be on a
trains,
show.
Planes, trains, and automobiles. Die-cast metal, planes, trains, and automobiles.
We got Jerry and Brian coming tomorrow.
Yeah, we got more folks coming. You might be seeing more shows, more programming, more to come here from Neighborhood News. And always, of course, check out George on his Twitter. He is very prolific there on Twitter. I'm sure everybody here watching is a follower of your Twitter, of course, George. But for those who aren't, George Webb on Twitter. And we will leave it there. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you maybe this weekend. I don't know about Saturday. We have been trying the Saturday night shows. Maybe we'll just.
I would rather just do one long show on Wednesday because it's a good. There's a lot of stuff, and it's great to have graphics. But I know, Aaron, with 4 kids, I can't even imagine how you can spend this amount of time. So
it's okay. We're ramping up. We're finding a way to make it work. But yeah, we might get some more shows. Maybe we'll do the one with you, or we'll see maybe one regularly scheduled, and then we can do special editions whenever there's a shred or something. But this is good for now. I don't know that we're getting back to the daily thing like we used to do. But thank you all for being here. Thank you, George. And we will see you all next time at Neighborhood News. George Webb Investigates. Thanks a lot. Bye. If you're able, please consider supporting George Webb at substack.com. for $8 a month so he can continue his excellent citizen journalism.